Welcome to another edition of the Populist Papers, where rogues and scoundrels gather unlimited motivation and vitality as we beseech the invisible chiefs to help guide you on a journey of subterranean enchantment where the elixir vitae awaits your indulgence.
Hi, welcome to episode 2 of the Populist Papers. I'm your host, Colin Kramer, and I need to talk about this Cal exit thing again. I think I've been had. Now, Alex Jones, I never really knew quite what to make of this guy, but he always struck me as some kind of, like a spoon feeder agent. You know, like they're out there to tell you exactly what you want to hear or to steer you in some kind of misdirection. Now, when I was involved with Advocates for an Independent California about 10 years ago, it was such a joke. It was just too ridiculous and too fringe to be taken seriously by anybody. But the day that Trump got elected, this new push for a Cal exit, it seemed like it had already hit the ground running. And every day there's a new Yes on Cal Exit type Facebook page or group that's popping up, and I'm being pushed to like it, and it makes me a little suspicious. Now, it didn't hurt that a lot of us were still in our denial or bargaining phases after November the 8th, but it's important to... Well, of course, and as a Jeffersonian Democrat, I feel like we should always be looking for new ways to improve our union. And it's important to know that our goal was never secession for its own sake, but the overall betterment of California and the United States. So, what if we split California into 3 states? Thereby creating 4 new Senate seats and help rebalance the power that way. Considering how well-funded these Cal exit campaigns seem to be, my Jewish paranoia sets in and goes a little haywire. We all know that Russia really wanted Donald Trump to be our president, to the point they even threatened to start a nuclear war had Clinton become president. And a lot of us assumed this was over Syria, or that Trump is deeply in debt to Russian oligarchs and favors to Russia may be his only way out of debt. And aside from all that, Trump may have no idea what kind of pawn he really is. I mean, what if Russia has been playing chess with us for decades? Well, we just thought we were playing checkers. Hey, we win, you lose, it's all over. No. They're much more long-term. Putin is a martial artist himself. And what if Trump is being used by Putin to undermine U.S. credibility and create as much chaos as possible? The fact is, Trump may not even be aware of it. And it's come to my attention that a lot of the big conspiracy theories of the past few decades are Russian psyops. They are masters of fake news. And we're basically living season 20 of The Americans right now. And so much of this conspiracy culture seems designed to make our populace feel completely disconnected from American leadership. And it's working. Alex Jones could very well be a Russian disinfo agent, and all of these secessionist campaigns are probably psyops meant to destabilize our country. Cal Exit already has an embassy in Moscow, and there's obviously big money involved with a lot of these Western separatist movement. There's something called the anti-globalist movement of Russia that's behind a lot of this, if you'd like to see for yourself. But Cal Exit is certainly not the grassroots effort that it masquerades as. Aldous Huxley said, "The price of freedom is eternal vigilance." We have to really focus and stay engaged in the process. Now more than ever. Because if we just go back to bed and tell everyone, you can't do anything, it's all part of the Illuminati, well, that's how the bastards win. By bringing down morale. Don't let them weaken us. I couldn't help but notice this self-appointed leader of the secessionist group, Yes California, which, by the way, changed its name from Sovereign California because I guess no one in the group was sure how to spell the word sovereign. Well, this guy, he isn't even from California. He's from New York and currently lives in Siberia. All seems pretty shady to me. So, there is no perfect government out there. The Smurfs came close, but there is something on the inside. The very essence of your own being is the most sovereign mechanism there is. Work on perfecting that essence, and the rest will fall into place. Dion Fortune said that the magician himself is the most powerful magic wand of them all. So whether it's a way to power your car with urine or a simple meditation method that'll recharge all 10 trillion of your bodily cells, we're there. That's what the Populist Papers are all about. Email me or tweet me, CLNKRMR, at that, or that at gmail.com. We're on Facebook, Populist Papers Podcast. Check it out, and let's figure it out. There's an old friend of mine that's decided to remain anonymous, and he has a car that runs on a diesel-electric hybrid engine. It has 4 batteries and gets 200 miles to the gallon. Worst part is, this is 1904 technology. And my friend, we'll call him CR, his father made a model of this car in the 70s and toured the country with it. He even sued the 3 major U.S. auto manufacturers as well as the federal government for committing fraud against the American people and withholding this technology from us. That's when he started getting death threats. Not only from enemies here at home, but Japanese automakers were also extremely upset with CR's father because he wouldn't sell the car to them. It was meant to be a gift for our community that still hasn't lived to see the light of day. But we're getting there. Slowly but surely. Did you hear about the 4 girls in Africa that figured out a way how to generate a day's worth of electricity from just 1 liter of urine? Pretty cool. And there's ways to convert your car to water power and even air power. Not entirely that I know of. These are hybrids as well. But wouldn't it be cool once we can just fill up our own tank in the morning? Could be fun. So when we come back, actor, improviser, and playwright Jim Shipley is going to share some of his thoughts and experiences with us on homelessness and the Jeffersonian tradition. So we'll be right back.
Old vocals. Is that recording? For centuries, control beyond infinity. Thousands and millions to a T. Collective conscious, endless seas. The truth finally surfaced. No longer a man, but not yet a god. How the masters of Neptune made me. brightness of the truth. It's coming, bruh. Without their magic wand, it's buried forever, but the turkeys don't care. They got billions to spare, raptures to scare. PhD, THC, LSD, DDR, RFK, LBJ, JFK, CPA. Ain't no way they're gonna listen anymore to your wars, to your whores anymore. The sun is fading, consuming, squeezing, jetting. Eternal slumber for those who wander away unprepared. Double dosing, crystal coursing forces from beyond. Emerging underworlds, warlords that have been here before. Purposely maddening, necessary methods for psychedelic magic. We're waiting for you to see the signs everywhere. We don't care. Undoing the experiment of hard time. Your nose dive, cosmic keys. Closing in, closing and cooling.
Welcome back. And with me live in the studio is actor, improviser, and one of my favorite people, Jim Shipley. Welcome, Jim. How's it going?
It's great. I noticed you had to read that off the clipboard. I don't remember what he does or what his name is, but he's one of my favorite people.
I wanted to make sure that I got your wording precise, actually, because, you know, I'm all about precision.
It's true. I'm the one who told you to say I'm one of your favorite people.
Exactly. Well, I do admit I love notes. And maybe I'm a little bit too much like that guy on the Peanuts with the safety blanket. But you always got to have something. Yeah, some kind of fail-safe.
What was that guy's name? Sherman, maybe?
Linus?
Was he the one? Yeah, probably.
Was that the one with the, or was that the filthy kid?
No, that guy. Oh, Pigpen was his name.
Okay, so he needed a blanket probably, but Schroeder was the one with the blanket.
Up. Yeah.
I was gonna, you know, this is radio for a reason. We're not really supposed to talk about like how shitty we look and what this place really looks like right now.
Or the fact that I took off my pants and shit. It's so hot.
So let's keep it between us. What you're actually seeing right now, I'd appreciate that.
You got it.
Although, hey, it's a podcast. This is kind of a private meeting for now because even to know about this thing, you know, it's kind of a privilege right now to be a part of this. So, I know you had a really interesting story. A lot of this show focuses on California culture, and a lot of people know we are the worst when it comes to homelessness. Mm-hmm. I mean, New York.
That's what I hear. Yeah.
Yeah, New York definitely has a problem too. But you look at Los Angeles, San Francisco, Santa Ana, San Diego. A lot of people like to blame Ronald Reagan because he did close down a lot of those facilities and whatnot when he was governor. But you know, this is another interesting thing: is LA just gets such a bad rap. People don't realize that the first VA was actually in West LA over there. That's why they call it federal and veteran. And a lot of people were making their way out. It was really hard to get to LA at the time. I don't even think
it's just hard to get around once you're here.
Because I don't even know if they had extended the rail over the Tehachapi Mountains yet. So I mean, there's another reason a lot of bandits and stuff like this area is kind of a lot of people were hiding from something.
Right. And still are. Yeah.
And we could even tie that in with our film conversation we're going to have because. You know, there's a lot of different theories why film came to LA. Some people said it was for more light and the gentler weather, but also there are a lot of people hiding from Edison and the patents, because he had patented a lot of that early film technology. So people were kind of here in hiding, making these movies. Really weird, but that's when Skid Row started.
Because they were using his technology illegally, or what?
Right.
Oh, huh. Interesting.
Yeah, he was a businessman and a damn good one.
Right.
It sounds like.
That's what they say.
But unfortunately, a lot of people made that trek all the way to Los Angeles to use the VA clinic, and they were turned away
because they had fought for the wrong side of the war.
Which was the Nazis?
These were actually Confederate veterans.
It
was that far back.
It is that old. That's right.
And so, I mean, L.A. has kind of had this issue for a long time.
Of hating Southerners?
Well, hey, that's another old joke. I have a Southern accent. Southern Californian.
Yeah.
That
It's
is.
different
But
Southern, yeah.
apparently FDR had to pass an amendment to make sure that veterans benefits were, all soldiers were
Right.
included. It's not something you had control
Interesting.
over.
Because they were all immediately afterwards forgiven. It might have been Grant, or it might have been who? Oh gosh, this is terrible. Who took over after Lincoln was assassinated?
Jackson, I believe.
Was it? Either way, I believe that they were all pardoned immediately afterwards, so they should have been, taken care of regardless. They were Americans, much to their own chagrin.
Sorry, Johnson. I get Johnson and Jackson confused.
You're right. It was Johnson. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. But obviously there's a long history of homelessness in LA.
Yeah.
In fact, it came to my attention recently, went on a little walking tour of Skid Row, and they pointed out that the term off the wagon came from, his name escapes me right now, Stuart Lyman, I think it was. He started the Union Rescue Mission. And he was able to get a lot of the prominent business people in LA to tithe, I think 10% of their income annually. Right. And they were able to create this amazing rescue mission. But the part of the condition was they only wanted it in a certain part of LA. They didn't want people getting too comfortable. So a lot of the treatment programs were mobile units. We still see medical mobile units these days, but apparently they were literally on wagons back then, and you'd literally get on a wagon when you join one of the programs.
Were they paddy wagons?
Oh, well, that's a whole nother thing.
People? Yeah.
Irish, discrimination. In fact, there's a Burger Town, which is also a food truck. It's a kind of a weird hipster thing. I know people from Portland who have not eaten from any restaurant that doesn't come from a truck since 2010. But there's one called Paddy Wagon. They've got a great logo. They say, "Our cows are vegan, so you don't have to be."
You know what? If I'm gonna incorporate veganism into my life, that would probably be the one way I would do it.
But I tried taking a friend there once, and he happened to be Irish American as well. He's like, "Paddy Wagon, that's some racist shit right there." And I'm like, boo-boo. They spell it Patty, not Padd.
Oh, I get it. See, since I didn't see it written down, I didn't get it. All right, now I do. Okay, you know what? Never mind. It's not racist anymore.
Exactly. We'll come back to that. But this idea that Skid Row has been centralized from the beginning. We only want them east of Main Street. And, even those wagon programs, they were kind of meant to only be temporary situations. And, eventually you'd leave the program, you'd get off the wagon. So it's weird how a lot of these terms still resonate. Now, I want to, and I definitely want to talk about the idea of decentralizing because that's a whole nother issue in and of itself. But I understand you have a little bit of experience firsthand with homelessness.
Right, yes. You understand that because I told you that.
Well, would you be willing to share some of your story?
Sure, yeah. I guess for the listeners who don't know this story, you obviously are intimately familiar with it. But to make a... I was attending a school that we attended together, you and I. But we, because it was a women's college, you and I weren't technically considered students. We were apprentices, which meant we were not just students, but we were also employees.
It's kind of the worst of both worlds.
It was absolutely
treated
the
like
worst
slave
of-
labor, yet the responsibilities of being a full-time staff.
Without much in the way of benefits. Certainly, whatever. It doesn't matter. It was a good time for the year it lasted for me, for the 2 years it lasted for you. So because of that, though, I was both an employee, a student, and actually, I guess adding a third, a resident. I had to give up, my house that I lived in before I went to that school. So I was very beholden to this college, obviously. Then I was wrongly accused of a very, let's just say a bad crime. And it was, the accusation occurred on the campus. So during a... I don't even know how. It was obviously, it was the summer program. I don't know how to describe it.
They run a summer theater festival.
Right, so we were kind of stuck there. So And even though the charge was idiotic, and it was because it was so idiotic, it ended up being thrown out of court because it was frivolous and it was silly, anyway, to cut a long story short, there went my my scholarship, there went my enrollment, there went my job, there went my housing. So like basically everything like that could have been taken from me was taken all at one time. So I ended up homeless, and what a great time that was. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think a lot of people take it for granted how easily things can just clusterfuck and can turn upside down.
It's when I come from a blue collar background, and I have never had a lot of money in my adult life. People don't realize that when you're poor, all it takes is one or two bad things. Really one, and then it snowballs, it avalanches, and you find yourself on the street. Or in my case, since it was Missouri in a park,
Even better.
It was better. It was a little more comfortable sleeping on the ground in a park than it was I imagine on the street. I'd find myself sleeping on park benches or under trees in public parks a lot of times. A little tip in case this happens to any of you all. I learned if you're more nocturnal, which I am, as you know, already very much nocturnal, I'd be awake during the evening hours as much as I could be, and I'd read or whatever during the evening, and I'd go to the public library during the day and go to one of their reading rooms, and I'd sleep there. Like I'd fall asleep in like one of those big chairs because it was the only way to, get a couple hours of sleep a lot of times. Because it may probably not surprise most people, but sleeping on the ground or on a park bench, not exactly the most comfortable thing you'd ever imagine. So a nice, even though it's an upright position, sleeping in a chair is, all things considered, a better option.
Definitely. One of the few socialist institutions we have left in America, the public library for everybody.
Yeah, it's great.
Now, we talked about some of the difficulties and especially how it affects sleep cycles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the last time we talked about this, I certainly had an epiphany because you brought up a point that most folks tend to have backwards about...
because obviously alcoholism and drug usage are frequently associated with homelessness, as I assume what you're referring to. And I think the stereotype holds true to some degree. I think obviously, really bad alcoholism and drug usage, of course, will lead to homelessness because, I met addicts who, if every dime that you ever get into your hand goes into, to drug usage, obviously you can't afford a home anymore. But what people don't realize is that a lot, I'd say in at least 50% of the cases, it's actually the other way around. Because of, like we were talking about, unfortunate circumstances that just befall people and they find themselves homeless. People don't realize that, particularly when you don't have a job, there are actually a lot of hours in the day. The day is long, and life in that circumstance is long. So, what do? You don't have a job, you don't have anywhere to go, you don't have anywhere to be. You got to do something to kill the time. And a lot of the homeless turn to drugs or alcohol just to kill the time. And I think we were joking earlier about my Irish heritage, my famous Irish drunkenness. So I've always, and as I think I've also always my entire life been a pretty bad insomniac. So I've frequently used alcohol to self-medicate, to just, if it's 5 or 6 in the morning and you got to be up at 9 and you still can't fall asleep, you have a few beers and knock yourselves out.
Hey, a lot of people forget, even during Prohibition, it was available for medicinal purposes.
Well, and that's what it was a lot of times. Like I would find that, now, I had no money, and I never begged or anything. So at that time in my life, that wasn't really an option. But for a lot of people, it's like if you are like I am, if you're an insomniac, and particularly people who find that they can't sleep on a park bench, like they're just, their body won't allow them to. You've got to turn yourself off somehow. And so a lot of people will turn to, like, if they can't get to sleep otherwise, they will use drugs and alcohol to do that. So that's why those are two main reasons I would say. Excuse me. The homelessness actually frequently precedes the drug and alcohol abuse, which is obviously contrary to what people assume.
Interesting. I think we've all known at least a few people in our lives that have, had to live on the streets at some point or the other. And if it's not on the streets, it might be living out of their car for a while.
Right.
I've known some people, they moved to LA and their first job was at the gym so that they could use the showers, things like that.
Yeah.
And
I want to clarify, like, I certainly didn't have it as bad as a lot of people. I still had my truck, which you packed for me when I left Iowa.
that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, so everything I owned was in the back of that truck, so I couldn't really sleep in it. I couldn't recline the chair. So a lot of people obviously they have no home and no car, so that's even worse, obviously. So I didn't have as bad as a lot of people do. But yeah, interestingly enough, I had my sleeping bag. Thankfully, I brought that to Iowa, so I had that and a pillow. So I would find myself sometimes, depending on where I was, I would actually sleep on top of my truck. I'd roll out my sleeping bag.
That's right.
Like
it was
mattress.
summertime, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was summertime. So I'd sleep on top of my truck.
Interesting.
If it didn't get too, what's the word? I don't know, but like insanely hot to where
Right.
that was just unfeasible.
The humidity in the Midwest.
Humidity in Missouri is nightmarish. Yeah, which is why another reason that's hard to sleep during the day or during the night a lot of times. So I'd go to the public library and sleep during the day in the AC.
Right. Now, maybe you can speak to this as well. A lot of people who find themselves in these situations, especially in more urban areas like East Side LA or downtown, I hear that there's sort of a recurring fear that maybe another homeless person is going to mess with you or something like that. So it seems like that will definitely make insomnia a lot worse too.
Oh yeah. You sleep more lightly if you're sleeping, which like we've kind of discussed, a lot of times it's not so much sleeping as being unconscious. But yeah, you got to protect yourself to that. In the community, it's known as getting rolled because they literally roll you over and pull shit out of your pocket.
Wow.
Yeah, that's where that term comes from.
All these literal origins
Yeah,
of popular
little origins
terms.
of words.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, something that I took away when I went on that tour of Skid Row, we had a few different guides and sort of hosts and speakers. It was a really interesting event put on by Esoteric, and I'd love to have Kim Cooper at some time. She does all kinds of kind of noir tours of L.A., see Raymond Chandler's L.A.,
Oh, I'd love that.
serial killer tours. Just, there's always a different theme, and it's definitely... the old Hollywood kind of vibe. And something else we've bonded over
Oh, sure.
throughout the years. But a real takeaway, I believe it was Officer Dion Joseph. I had never heard of him before, but as soon as he started speaking, he was saying, folks, don't believe the papers. Which made me think, I got to start reading these papers.
Whatever papers he's talking about, I need to read them so I can not believe them.
He's obviously a controversial figure.
He's clearly not talking about the Populist papers. Because those are always to be believed.
Now we're talking. Well, exactly, and that's why we're trying to bring as many different points of view together and kind of figure out what are the real issues, And I think now in retrospect, he was talking about, what was the proposition? I believe it was 215. We no longer arrest people for small amounts of drugs, and that's most people are pretty excited about Prop 64, legalization of marijuana. And, it's so tough when there's this much money spent in elections because I'll read some articles that convince me, wow, we cannot vote for the legalization of weed because, what it's going to do, make it illegal for people that are under 21. As it is, we don't arrest people anymore for marijuana. And so going back to Dion Joseph, it sounded like he had real issues with that Prop 215 in 2014. We can't incarcerate people for small amounts of drugs. It sounds like a lot of the authority figures they know who the gang leaders are. They know the people, and they're kind of entitled to that judgment.
Know the characters.
So even if they need to get you for something petty at the time, it's a lot better to bring them in for something small. And, basically, I'm going around the pillar to get to the podium here. But the whole Skid Row situation, centralize something in one area like that. And this is what really impressed me about Officer Joseph's speech. He said that if just one facility even a small, little humble one-story facility were to be opened up in every neighborhood in LA, there'd be no Skid Row. And I was there while they even just dumped a busload of battered women there because they were being just thrown around from facility to facility. I don't know if overcrowding was the issue, but somehow they just wound up downtown right there at the Union Rescue Mission, and they had to get them back on the bus. No arrangements were made, and people are just dumped there, and it creates, everyone's like, oh, don't ever go east of Main Street. But if every community would step up and do their part just a little bit, open one facility per community, then we could decentralize. And that's kind of a micro for the bigger issue too, about centralization of power. And
I don't. The thing is, that's a tough thing. Particularly in a city of this size, because what do you do with that? And I sympathize certainly with the cops, and to a much lesser degree with the lawmakers, because in a city like Detroit, your homeless problem should be solved. It's like all these empty ass houses that have just been sitting here for a decade or longer. Just let every homeless person who wants to, hey, look, here's a house. Hey, you got a house. That is clearly not the situation in LA, where the market is saturated beyond belief. I mean, the amount of money we pay in rent here, it's insanity. And that actually brings back up the idea of my homelessness. And I thank whatever power above or below, whatever, every day. Well, not every day. I don't think about it every day, thank goodness. But I'm very thankful that I was homeless, and that's probably the only time you'll ever hear that phrase. I'm thankful that I was homeless. But no, I'm thankful that when I was homeless, it was in Missouri, where I was able to claw myself out of homelessness. I sincerely do not believe that had it happened here in LA, with rent prices the way they are, with the job market as terrible as it is, and so forth, I think I would still be homeless today. I don't think, unless I had the capacity of mind to get the fuck out and go somewhere else. I was able to, scrape together a few dollars and eventually get a place in Missouri, where before, when we went to that college together, my rent, and I was a bartender, so I made good money. But my rent was $400 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment.
Oh boy,
$400 a month. And granted, I lived in the poor side of town, in a kind of an older, rundown house. But $400 a month for a 2-bedroom. Obviously, in circumstances like that, it makes more. It makes it possible, I guess, to get yourself out of that situation. Here, I can't even imagine.
Wow.
And that's the thing. It goes, excuse me, to what you were saying about like the centralization of this. It's like nobody wants homeless encampments in their neighborhood, and I don't think it's a lack of sympathy, and I don't necessarily begrudge them, the neighborhood people, that instinct. But what's the solution? Like, other than centralizing, as you were talking about, like what I mean. In this city, what can you do? I mean, that's one for the ages.
It's tough,
in my opinion. Yeah.
And as much as this is a whole other can of worms, of course. As much as I support a state's right to secede, in the Jeffersonian tradition,
Sure.
if the government has proved itself to have abused its powers and the citizens want to fulfill their duty to create a better form of government, a more perfect union, I am completely against secession on a city scale.
Oh, sure.
When you have a place like Beverly Hills surrounded on all sides by another city, you don't have any business. It's just been an obstacle. It took decades to extend the metro line because of their property values.
Oh, it was done in such a horrible way. But the thing is, and this is, this is something that people need to think about a lot more often, is that we look at things from the prism of today, which is a huge problem. And not only is it, it gives you false impressions of reality, but it's also it's unfair. You cannot judge a past culture based on today's mores. That's wrong. I mean, let's put it this way: 500 years from now, people are going to think we are a bunch of like hateful, illiberal, undemocratic motherfuckers. And is that fair? No, I don't think it is. Like a lot of us are working very hard to fix things right now, and to be condemned by, our grandchildren or whatever as being hateful because we don't hold their values in a completely different time period, that's wrong. And so anyway, what brought that up is the idea of Beverly Hills. Like, they didn't secede from LA. LA just swallowed up all these other neighborhoods around Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills was never a part of Los Angeles. It was rich enough, I guess, that they were able to resist being swallowed up by the greater city.
They had good attorneys.
Right. Sure, one of many reasons. So it's not necessarily fair to say, "Oh, Beverly Hills, like how dare they, pull away from LA?" Well, they didn't. They were never part of LA.
I think, just to clarify a couple things, Culver City was the one. There's kind of the fascist four, as I used to. West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Culver City, and Santa Monica. And the hypocrisy.
What about Holmby Hills and like the insanely rich places?
Those
that
are
part of LA? Or?
Like Echo Park. Oh, for those of you that don't know, Jim and I were also roommates for about 15 months.
A year, yeah.
Yeah, a little over a year maybe. Fascinating period, I think, in both of our lives. But, like Echo Park, a lot of those communities like Holmby Hills and Brentwood, they're technically unincorporated neighborhoods.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Real estate is such a bizarre world.
Yeah. But it's Holmby Hills is interesting because like we talk about, everybody knows Beverly Hills. It's like, oh, that's the rich place of LA. But people, and I think they do this on purpose. Like some people, because of the Fresh Prince, know what Bel Air is, but very few people know what Holmby Hills is. And it's like, I wish you could see my hands right now because I'm putting Beverly Hills like above the rest of LA. Like right at about shoulder level. Now, Holmby Hills I'm reaching as high as I can possibly reach. That's how far above, as far as like richness, Holmby Hills is above every other part of LA. Like, that's insanely rich area. Like a bunch of Tudor style homes, like the oldest, nicest homes of the LA area that still exist. It's quite a place.
Well, speaking of California culture and people that are rich as fuck,
pop
quiz.
You're making me shy. Oh, come on.
Pop quiz. What neighborhood did Saved by the Bell take place in?
Are you doing your Lambie impression? Is that what that was?
Let's leave Lambie out of this. If you're listening, Lambie, shout out.
I'm sorry. What did you say? What part did?
Do you need multiple choice?
No. The question was
what neighborhood
and
or city? Don't know the legalities of every single part of town.
Yeah.
Did Saved by the Bell take place in?
Saved by the Bell. Was it Marina Del Rey?
Oh, no. Those kids would never live down there.
Malibu. I don't know. Was it?
Very close. That would have been one of my multiple choice options.
Where I would assume that like the one season where they all worked on the beach would have been Santa Monica, because that's where all those beach clubs
That
were.
would have been your A option, and I think you just said your C option, so what's right in between? Not necessarily physically, but what do you think would have been my B?
Oh, Palisades?
Pacific Palisades.
Palisades.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you'd have to, BitTorrent the entire season, because I don't, or the entire series rather, to find just the right episode where they reveal that. But yep, it was Pacific Palisades.
First play I ever wrote 2 years ago, which got produced 2 years ago, and it's actually being published this year. So I should have added that to my bio. Damn it! I should have written Populist playwright.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, this should be coming out. Oh no, I'm sorry, not this year. It'll be coming out early next year. I forget that we're at the end of this year already. Oh, jeez. But yeah, the part of it took place in Pacific Palisades, because I was trying to indicate a certain type of, privilege and richness that occurred.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do want to speak. Well, I think it might be a good thing that we kind of get more, a little more empathetic with each generation. So it makes sense that over time they'd look back and be like, "What?" To a degree, even they'll probably look at cars and how many people died in car accidents and think of us as the biggest idiots. You guys allowed cars to be legal? I mean, we do our own weird calculus to justify the risk and the reward. Yeah. And they'll probably look back and be like, how many people died in car accidents every year, you morons?
Well, sure, but I mean, I think that's true of lots of things. I sincerely believe that there will come a time when there will be no unwanted pregnancies, and people will look back and be like, "Oh my God, you murdered, unborn children?" And is that fair? I don't think it is. So to I agree with you that it's good that we become more empathetic. I hope we do. But part of that empathy, in my opinion, is being empathetic towards those who came before us and considering the time period in which they lived,
Definitely an interesting debate, and it deserves more attention. Okay, so we were talking earlier about Jeffersonian policies, especially as they regard to patents. Yeah. And I actually claimed, I was going through some of my notes, and it almost looks like a total religious freak's New Testament, like how they highlight the entire thing. Like if Jesus said it, it's highlighted, the entire, New Testament. And I'm going through and I'm finding
the King James version where it's in red, right?
Exactly. Right. So he does know your stuff.
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't, because as an Irish Catholic, we didn't use the King James, but
right.
So I wasn't entirely sure about that.
Right. We had said some quotes earlier, but basically what Thomas Jefferson was saying, his point about patents, and that there was sort of a free exchange of ideas. Mm-hmm. His take on patents was, to paraphrase at least, that men are of nature, and hence men's ideas are also part of nature. And that sharing our ideas and discoveries, it's almost a moral obligation, just for the betterment of mankind and the earth.
That mimetic process.
Right. And that even if, okay, you have such a great invention, let's say, okay, maybe you can live off the profits from that for your lifetime. A patent was never meant to be this dynastic kind of thing.
Sure.
And I know that your dad and your grandpa kind of upheld this Jeffersonian tradition in a way.
Right.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, they're both chiropractors, or they were both chiropractors. My grandfather has passed. My father is still a chiropractor. Or no, I'm sorry, he's retired, but he's still with us. But now my sister is also a chiropractor, so we've got three generations. And that's actually the interesting thing about my going into the business I have gone into, because every single member of my family is in healthcare. and I'm back home like, well, what's Jimmy? What's he up to? What does Jimmy do? And like, he pretends for a living. So yeah, I'm very highly respected in my family. But ultrasound is a process that I think people are, for the most part, aware of, a type of political, Jesus Christ, we've been talking about too much politics. It's a type of physical therapy, I guess is how I'd classify it. But it's also it's a process that's kind of hard on a lot of people. It requires like direct stimulation, and it can cause problems, particularly in joints and so forth. So my grandfather, along with my newly minted chiropractor father, came up with a new ultrasound technique where they ran the well, this is embarrassing. I don't know what ultrasound is. The waves, I don't know, whatever it is. They ran it through water instead of using direct contact, which made it a much gentler way of providing that kind of therapy.
Probably more effective, too.
Yeah, I mean, anything that's going to cause... I mean, not in all situations, but anything... I mean, it just stands to reason that anything that causes less inflammation and less pain is going to be more effective, because those things obviously diminish returns. So, so they came up with that process, and I think the part that you were impressed about with it was that they could have theoretically patented it, but my dad's my dad's whole thing was that he wanted to help people, not become a millionaire. So he just went to every seminar he was invited to, and he taught everybody how to do it. He spread it all over, and now people all over the country use it. So yeah, theoretically, I could be like a billionaire, probably. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, like a physical, like a car is much easier to patent, I would assume, than like a process, a PT process.
Intellectual property.
Right. So I don't know if that's even necessarily the case, but he could have certainly made it like an intellectual property type of thing, I'm sure. But and you know what? We actually probably approached this conversation the wrong way. Because this is something I discovered later on in life, because I'm 80, and now that I'm old, it's something I discovered late in life. No, but I grew up, with an adequate amount of respect for your father, as one does. But I thought of him as a chiropractor, and sure, thank you. I thought of him as, regular guy, like you think of your dad. It wasn't until many years later that he told me actually reluctantly. I don't know. I was asking about this process, and he was like, "Well, actually, your grandfather and I came up with this," and it blew my mind because we all have a proper degree of respect, or we should have, for our parents. But then when you find out like they've done something like really impressive, you're like, oh, like it's like a paradigm shift, like changes the way you look at someone who's very close, like someone you think you know very well. And then I find out that these seminars he's going to, like every few months or whatever, he's not attending these seminars. He's giving this, like he's a keynote speaker and stuff. And I'm like, what? Like my mind is blowing.
You were in charge of this thing?
I mean, he's not in charge. He's not like the guys who put it together. But he's like the speaker that
Guest
people
of honor.
come to see. Yeah, like the people come from all over the country to hear my dad speak. And I'm like, what? Like my dad, this guy who walks around the house in underwear and a Cardinals hat, this guy is the one that people come to see? You got to be kidding me. So it was like it was definitely a very awakening moment,
Absolutely. I know the feeling. My surrogate father, Peter Biger, took years for me to extract this fact out of him, but he actually invented hip hop back in Greenwich Village in 1963. Kind of a gypsy Jewish thing. We'll save that story for. We'll get him on the line actually.
Yeah.
And my mom too. She does tarot.
Also invented hip hop.
She close. She invented a new system of tarot reading.
No kid.
Oh, it wasn't until like a decade because it was always around me. So we kind of take it for granted, and it's almost a joke too. Oh yeah, that's their thing. Yeah. And it'd be like, oh yeah, do you want a reading? Do you want a reading? And it wasn't until I saw other people doing tarot readings. We're in LA. There's a lot of people that are into mysticism and prophecy and the dark arts and the new age, all that good stuff. Oh, and, we got to talk about your dad and crystals and stuff, too.
Crystals. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm looking at your list that you sent me right now.
Uh-oh. Right, yeah. I always like my guests to be prepared. You can have the option. You can be a control freak like me and write a billion different notes on 10 different clipboards.
Or you can be the exact opposite.
As you see before you.
Like
you
me.
can wing it, or you can do a little bit of both.
Yeah, I literally did not. I looked at the list you sent me and haven't thought about it since. Because I just wanted to speak off the cuff.
We're extreme, but I impressed you with the lists.
Absolutely.
And, we're extremely busy, too.
And
so
in retrospect,
sometimes...
given my performance tonight, I wish I had prepared a little bit. But
well, a lot of this appreciation for our parental figures, it comes from life experience. We get out there, we see how these other people are doing it, and it's like...
boy, you suck at this. My dad did
you think we fuck around? Yeah, I've seen a much better way. So let's hear more about this invention.
I think, I was certainly a teenager. I may have been outside of high school or post-high school when I found this out, but I was still fairly young. And when I found this out, I'm like, what? Well, then why didn't you patent it? Oh my God, we could be so rich. Because you're a stupid kid and you don't think about the repercussions of something like that. And he said what I believe I said earlier, which is that he doesn't want to be rich. He wants to heal people. And that's like one of the first times I recall really respecting my father, not as my dad, but as a man,
as an innovator,
as a man. We all respect our parents as our parents, but this was like I think one of the first times I was like I respect him. If he's not my father, I respect this person, his man, as
principles.
His principles as an innovator, as you said, as just a good dude trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. It's almost, and we can get into this too. Acting sometimes, if someone forgets their lines, or if someone's just kind of improvising something, this may not be in the acting world, but wherever, you often notice people looking up, as if God or the heavens or the aliens are going to send them the right line or the right idea. And I heard a fascinating take on this. It may have been from Neil deGrasse Tyson. He said we're so conditioned physically by looking up to our elders that we're used to for the answers we look up.
Interesting.
Right. So there is a real archetypal sort of, it's embedded in us.
Huh. Yeah, that could be where that comes from. That's interesting. Right. Whether it's looking up to God or just looking up to what is God as a child, which is your parents.
Right.
Interesting.
So it's fascinating. The more we learn about them, the more we can kind of look at them in a totally different way.
All right, great. Yeah, let's move on to the other things. I think you're going to get a lot more material out of this. You were talking about Noir, which we both fucking love.
How'd you get into that?
How did I get into noir? Well, I'll tell you, Colin.
I'm so glad you asked.
I'm so glad you asked. I don't. You know what? It's always been a part of my personality is that my love of like old things. You know.
Golden age of Hollywood.
Yeah, well, but even before I even knew what that was, I remember I was probably 13 years old, and that's about the age, we kind of start getting into music, around that age.
Discover a lot of things at age 13.
Yeah, like right around there. It might have been 12, whatever. But I found my dad, and this is so funny because my dad doesn't know anything about music, and I love him to death, but he knows dick about music.
Do you think he's listening right now?
Well, not at the moment, but he might in the future. Well, and here's the thing, to his credit, my dad, who doesn't really listen to or really have much appreciation for music, the music he does like, it's the the smart set, like the smartest. Like he loves Patsy Cline, he loves Sam and Dave, like he loves like the best music. But other than that, he doesn't listen to it and he doesn't care about it. So anyway, I was going through my dad and my mom's, because my mom was still alive at this point. I was going through one of their through their car, and I came across this CD of this guy that I'd heard of, and I'm like, Frank Sinatra, huh? I've heard of him.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're a kid, you're 12 years old, you're like, I've heard of this guy, and I put the goddamn thing in, and Jesus Christ, it blew my fucking mind, and I was like, this is what I've been looking for. Like I felt like in Back to the Future, like, hey Marvin, it's your cousin. You know that sound you've been looking for? Well, listen to this. And then the speakers came on, and it was goddamn Frank Sinatra, and I was like, holy shit, yes, this is the sound I've been looking for. Because I grew up, like I said, my dad wasn't huge into music. We went to Branson a lot, so I heard a lot of country, which I loved. And I didn't necessarily know what was country and what wasn't.
How far away was Branson, Missouri?
Probably about 3 hours from where I grew up.
Edwardsville?
Yeah, 3 hours driving. So pretty close. And when you're a kid, you don't know, like, styles of music. You don't know, like, country is a different thing than jazz, which is a different thing than pop, which is a different thing from rock, you don't know that. Like, music is music.
You just show up wherever you show up.
Right. So I grew up around a lot of, like, Patsy Cline, Alabama, Garth Brooks, that kind of shit. And I didn't realize it was country. And I loved it, and I still do. But I heard this thing that turned out to be jazz. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And it blew my goddamn mind. And I from then on, it was just anything I could find. I discovered AMC, American Movie Classics, which at that time actually played American movie classics, not The Walking Dead, Breaking Bad, which, don't get me wrong, I thank God every day that AMC switched over to the shit they're doing now, because as much as I love classic movies, Breaking Bad, Walking Dead, Mad Men, that shit's better. So I'm glad they did that, because we still have TCM, so it's fine.
It was the 90s.
Yeah, it was a different time. So I figured out that I could actually not just listen to Sinatra, but I could see him on old movies. So I started watching old movie musicals, and I'm like, okay, I like this a lot, and I still do, but there's always kind of like a little bit like something missing. I'm like, it could be better, like it could be, like I like this a lot, but maybe there's something else out there. So I kept watching more and more on AMC, and finally it turned away from like musicals and light comedy. And don't get me wrong, the entire time this was all happening, I was still listening to other jazz vocalists. I got into Billie Holiday at the age of like 14 or 15. You have to understand, in the middle of like Hillbillyville, Illinois, population 2,200. It was weird that this 14-year-old kid is listening to Billie Holiday. It
was like getting into punk rock when everybody else was listening to like Coolio.
Sure,
and
exactly.
Stuff in my town, yeah.
Like I was the only, when we went to watch the movie Clueless, when they made the joke about Billie Holiday, I was the only person in the entire fucking theater, kid or adult, who got it. When Billy Madison, when they made the joke about Miles Davis, again, I was like 14 years old. I was the only person in the theater, child or adult, who got the joke about Miles Davis.
Do you think those things made you want to move out of the
No, because I didn't. Well, if anything, it made me want to stay because I felt like the cool guy. I'm like, you guys don't get the cool joke about Miles Davis. You don't realize he's like the architect of the cool movement. What a bunch of douchebags! I'm the king. No, it wasn't that. But it was kind of cool that I was like the only person who was getting these jokes. So this whole time I'm listening to, got into Miles Davis, probably around the age of 14, maybe 15. Billie Holiday. It would be another few years before I discovered the great, in my opinion, who is Chet Baker. West Coast style. You should love this guy. But yeah, I was getting into all these guys, and I'm watching.
I thought you were gonna say Duke Ellington.
Duke. Well, that's
Thelonious Monk or something.
Well, Duke Ellington is a different era, and I love
Chet Baker. Okay, I'll take that.
I mean, Chet Baker. I mean, he's the great of the cool movement, in my opinion. Because I love Miles Davis, but I you know what? I shouldn't qualify. Miles Davis is great, obviously, and Chet Baker is also
different
great.
department.
Well, yeah, it's East Coast versus West Coast. That's all it is. They're both amazing, but Miles is West. I'm sorry, East, and Chet is West. So anyway, I'm watching all these movies. I'm watching. I'm trying to think. Anchors Away. And what else was Sinatra in? These different movie musicals, and so then I get into I'm like, well, fuck, I gotta watch more Sinatra. I come across The Man with the Golden Arm, which was dark, and weird, and for a kid, again, I was like 15 years old or whatever. If you don't know the plot of the movie, he's a heroin addict, which for a movie from the 40s is very dark.
Golden Arm.
The Man with the Golden Arm, exactly.
Like that song, Golden Sun. Who
Right.
did that? Stranglers. Mm-hmm. It's all about the golden. That's the closest you can come to tasting sunshine. Is
Right.
through heroin.
Right, and it is two dudes like you and I who, in our day, have done a shitload of drugs. Like is that not okay to talk about?
Some of my students might hear this
Oh,
one
if they
day.
hear that. Well,
But you know what?
I'm just kidding. It was just me. I've done a lot of drugs.
I think they can handle it.
I think they can handle it. So The Man with the Golden Arm, which is, this dark story about this heroin addict, which obviously is uncommon for the 40s, that led me down a very dark path. And I don't want to necessarily say that it was that movie, because I don't necessarily remember it as such. The movie that I really remember as changing my life as far as like my views on art, particularly in storytelling, theater, film, and so forth, is the great noir classic, This Gun for Hire, starring Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. And that was the movie that blew my fucking mind and really changed my whole perception about what I thought movies could be, what I thought a lot of things could be. And that's one I think everybody should look up. Like if you're looking for a great classic movie, if you're looking for a way into noir, if you're looking into a way into like art that's like, dark or creepy or whatever, check out This Gun for Hire. It's an absolute classic, and it does. It has the problems of movies of its generation, where the code forced them to have kind of a sort of happy ending.
Formulaic.
Well, it wasn't. No, it was definitely not formulaic, but the code dictated that if a bad guy was one of your characters, he had to get like justice at the end. So without spoiling the end, justice came about to one of our lead characters. But they still managed to make it a phenomenal story. And over the years, that's what got me into noir. It was the first one that I really remember being like, oh my god, like this is something that it's you that I want to like make part of my life about, was that movie.
Tell us about what you got lined up. How can people catch you? I know you got a lot of exciting projects recently.
Yeah, gosh, you can probably see me in a bunch of commercials right now. A Ford commercial, couple 76 gasoline commercials. I was just this month I was on Superstore on NBC, episode number 3, I want to say. I was just on The Odd Couple on CBS, episode number 2.
Right, that was a big deal.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, so I keep busy a little bit. I'm in the midst of producing a short film that that was produced recently as a play, and myself and the other lead actor decided to produce it as a short film. So we're working on that right now. So yeah, we're keeping busy. Always good to keep busy.
I love it. You're definitely someone for us to keep an eye out on. All right, so that concludes this segment of the Populist Papers. Jim, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, Populist Papers.
We'll see you next time.
Hey, I just wanted to give a big thanks to our guest, Jim Shipley, show director and producer Myra Rodriguez, and Chris Cooley, who, as always, provided all of the music that you heard today. Also, I want to thank all of you for listening and let you know that our February show, episode 3, will feature my long-anticipated interview with filmmaker Michael Ryan about Cinemagic and the clean energy revolution. We'll see you then.